In June 1962, inmates Clarence Anglin, John Anglin, and Frank Morris escaped the Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, a maximum security prison located on Alcatraz Island in San Francisco Bay, California, USA. In my last video regarding Alcatraz, I discussed the escape itself, and in this video I will be going over evidence and reported sightings as to whether the inmates survived the escape and were able to, or are still currently living out the rest of their days in anonymity. There have been hundreds of reported sightings of Morris and the Anglins over the years. However, in this video I have compiled what I and many others believe to be the most substantiated of these claims. The escape on the night of June 11th, 1962 was not discovered until the morning of June 12th due to the successful dummy head ruse the inmates had initiated the night before. Multiple military and law enforcement agencies conducted an extensive air, sea and land search over the next 10 days. On June the 14th, a Coast Guard cutter picked up a paddle floating about 200 yards off the southern shore of Angel Island. On the same day and in the same general location, workers on another boat found a wallet wrapped in plastic complete with names, addresses and photos of the Anglins' friends and relatives. On June the 21st, shreds of raincoat material believed to be the remnants of a raft were found on a beach not far from the Golden Gate Bridge. The following day, a prison boat picked up a deflated life jacket made from the same material 50 yards off of Alcatraz Island. According to the final FBI report, no other physical evidence was ever found. FBI agents surmised early that the men had drowned. They cited the fact that the individual's personal effects, such as the Anglin's wallet, were the only belongings they had, and the men would have drowned before leaving them behind. However, no human remains were found at the time. FBI investigators announced their official position that while it was theoretically possible for the men to have reached Angel Island, the odds of them having survived the turbulent currents and frigid waters of the bay were negligible. According to the final FBI report, West said they had planned to steal clothes and a car upon reaching land, but no such thefts were reported in the immediate area. In terms of the viability of the escape, a 2003 Mythbusters episode on the Discovery Channel tested the feasibility of an escape from the island aboard a raft constructed from the same materials and tools available to the inmates, who concluded at the end of the experiment that this was indeed possible. A 2014 study of the ocean currents by scientists at Delft University concluded that if the prisoners left Alcatraz at 11:30 p.m. on June 11th, they could have made it to the Horseshoe Bay just north of the Golden Gate Bridge, and that any debris would have floated in the direction of Angel Island, consistent with where the actual paddle and belongings were originally found. If they left before or after that time, they said tides and currents were such that their chances of survival were slim. A 2011 documentary on the National Geographic Channel entitled Vanish from Alcatraz reported that contrary to the official FBI report, a raft was discovered on Angel Island on June 12, 1962, the day after the escape, with footprints leading away from it. Furthermore, a 1955 blue Chevrolet was reported stolen in Marin County the same day, a claim corroborated by contemporaneous stories in the Humboldt Times and the San Francisco Examiner. The following day, a motorist in Stockton, California, about 80 miles east of San Francisco, reported to the California Highway Patrol that he had been forced off the road by 3 men in a blue Chevrolet. The first reported sighting worth noting of is Fred Brizzi's account. A 2015 History Channel documentary entitled Alcatraz: Search for the Truth presented further circumstantial evidence gathered over the years by the Anglin family. Kenneth and David Widner displayed Christmas cards containing the Anglins' handwriting and allegedly received by family members for 3 years after the escape. While the handwriting was verified as the Anglins', none of the envelopes contained a postmarked stamp, so experts could not determine when they had been delivered. The family cited a story from family friend Fred Brizzi, who grew up with the brothers and claimed to have recognized them in Rio de Janeiro in 1975. They produced photographs purportedly taken by Brizzi, including one of 2 men who, according to Brizzi, were John and Clarence Anglin standing next to a large termite mound in Brazil. The other photos showed a Brazilian farm that Brizzy claimed was owned by the men. Forensic experts working for the family confirmed that the photos were taken in 1975 and asserted that the two men were more than likely the Anglins, although the age and condition of the photo and the fact that both men were wearing sunglasses hindered efforts to make a definitive determination. Brizzy also presented an alternative escape theory. Rather than use the raft to cross the bay, he said they paddled around the island to the boat dock, where they attached an electrical cord, which was reported missing from the dock on the night of the escape, to the rudder of a prison ferry that departed the island shortly after midnight and were towed behind it to the mainland. Art Roderick, a retired deputy US Marshal who had once headed the investigation and later worked with the Anglin family, called Brizzy's photograph of the two men absolutely the best actionable lead we've had, but then added, it could still all be a nice story which isn't true, or the photograph could be a misdirection aimed at steering the investigation away from the Anglins' actual whereabouts. Michael Dyke, the last deputy marshal assigned to the case, said Brizzy was a drug smuggler and a con man, and was suspicious of his account. Brizzy's widow said that she never heard him mention seeing the Anglin brothers in Rio, and that he was a con man who was prone to making up stories. An expert working for the US Marshals Service did not believe the photograph was legitimate. Dyke said measurements of the physical characteristics of the Anglin brothers indicate that they are not the men in the Brazil photo, but acknowledged the difficulty in making a definitive determination and ruling it out as a valid lead. However, in January 2020, an Irish creative agency and AI specialists at IDEN-TV used facial recognition techniques to conclude that the men in the photos were in fact John and Clarence Anglin. Robert Anglin reportedly told family members before his death in 2010 that he had been in contact with John and Clarence from 1963 until approximately 1987. Surviving family members who said they had heard nothing since Robert lost contact with the brothers in 1987 announced plans to travel to Brazil to conduct a personal search, but Roderick cautioned that they could be arrested by Brazilian authorities because the Alcatraz escape remains an open Interpol case. In a 2019 episode of the series Mission Declassified, investigative journalist Christoph Putzel corroborated much of the information released by the FBI and other sources, including the raft found on Angel Island. He quoted various reports mentioning a blue Chevrolet of the same description as the one stolen after the escape, spotted in Oklahoma, Indiana, Ohio, and South Carolina, where 3 months after the escape, 3 men matching the escapee's description attempted to acquire a residence in the woods. Direct accounts from the Anglin family. Family members of the Anglin brothers occasionally received postcards and messages over the years. Most were unsigned. One was signed Jerry and another Jerry and Joe. The family also produced a Christmas card, purportedly received in the family mailbox in 1962, saying, "To Mother from John, Merry Christmas." Another of the Anglin's 11 siblings, Robert, also said that sometimes the phone would ring, and all that could be heard on the other end was breathing. He went on to state that, "I suppose all that could have been was pranks, but maybe it was the brothers." The mother of the Anglin brothers received flowers anonymously every Mother's Day until her death in 1973, with 2 very tall, unusual women in heavy makeup being reported to have attended her funeral. Federal officials say that in the mid to late 1960s and into the 1970s, there were 6 or 7 sightings reported of the Anglin brothers, all in North Florida or Georgia. Robert Anglin said that in 1989, when the father of the Anglin brothers died, 2 strangers in beards showed up at the funeral home. According to Robert, they stood in front of the casket looking at the body for a few minutes, then wept, and subsequently walked out. Frank Morris's cousin's account. In 2011, an 89-year-old man named Bud Morris, who claimed he was a cousin of Frank Morris, said that on 8 or 9 occasions prior to the escape, he had delivered envelopes of money to Alcatraz guards, presumably as bribes. He further claimed to have met his cousin face to face in a San Diego park shortly after the escape. His daughter, who was 8 or 9 years old at the time, said she was present at the meeting with who was referred to as Dad's friend Frank. That pretty much sums up most of the significant leads as to whether Morris and the Anglins survived the escape, as well as reported sightings of them in the years that followed. Thank you for watching. Be sure to check out my previous video on the escape itself. Feel free to subscribe and I'll see you in the next video. Also, feel free to comment whether you think Morris and the Anglins did in fact survive the escape attempt and how they went about doing it, and whether they may still be alive today. I believe they'd be in their early 90s, but it is still possible.